Welcome to this exciting tutorial on building a game with JavaFX. In today's session, we'll be developing a simple catching game where players will attempt to catch falling objects. By the end of this tutorial, you'll have a solid understanding of JavaFX and some basic game development concepts. Let's dive in. First things first. Before we jump into coding, make sure you have JavaFX set up on your system. You'll need JDK 11 or later installed along with the JavaFX SDK. You can download the SDK from the official OpenJFX website. Once you have everything set up, create a new Java project in your IDE. Name it Catch Game. If you're using IntelliJ IDEA, make sure to configure the JavaFX libraries in your project settings so that we can access JavaFX classes. Now let's create our main class. We'll name it Catch Game. This class will extend application, which is the starting point for JavaFX applications. In this basic setup, we have created a pane which will hold all our game elements and a scene that defines the dimensions of our window. Next, let's run the program to see our empty game window. Now that we have our basic window up, let's add a player character. We're going to create a rectangular shape to represent the player. Let's define a new method to add this shape. This createPlayer method creates a blue rectangle as our player character, setting its position in the window. You should call this method inside your start method after creating the pane. Let's now add some interactivity. We want the player character to move left and right when the arrow keys are pressed. We'll be adding a key event handler. With this code, we listen for key press events and move the player rectangle accordingly. Test the app to see if you can now move the blue rectangle left and right. Next, let's introduce some falling objects that the player must catch. We can use circles to represent these objects. First, we'll create a method to generate a falling object. This method creates a red circle at a random x-coordinate at the top of the screen. We will call this in our main loop to generate the objects. Now, we need a timer to control how frequently these objects fall. We can use a timeline for this purpose. Let's declare a timeline instance. We'll set it up in our start method to add falling objects every second. This timeline creates a new falling object every second and starts the animation for it. Next, we need to define the animateFallingObject method that will handle the falling motion. In this method, we update the Y position of the object to create a falling effect. If it reaches the bottom of the window, we remove it from the pane. So far, we have the player, falling objects, and animations set up. Now, let's implement a scoring system. We need to keep track of how many objects the player has caught. Let's start by declaring a score variable. We need to initialize the score text and add it to the pane. Do this inside the start method. Let's now implement the catching mechanic. We'll reveal in the animateFallingObject method if the falling object intersects with the player rectangle. If it does, we increase the score by 1 and remove the falling object. Now, test the game. You should see the score increase whenever you catch a falling object with your player character. This mechanic encourages engaging gameplay. It's time to improve our game with a game over feature. We should define what happens if the player misses too many objects. Let's set a threshold for missed catches. Inside the animateFallingObject method, check for missed catches. If an object goes past the player, increment the missed count. If it reaches the max underscore misses, display a game over message and stop the game. Now let's define the game over method that will display a game over message and stop the game. Run the game again to see how the game ends after the max missed catches. Make sure to test it thoroughly to ensure everything works as expected. As we near the end of the tutorial, let's polish our game a bit. We'll add sound effects when catching objects and when the game ends. For that, you'll need to import the appropriate libraries for sound. You'll need to place sound files in the resources folder of your project. Ensure the sound files are named catch.wave and gameover.wave. Play the sounds in the if statement when catching an object and in the gameover method. We're almost done. You now have a basic catching game built with JavaFX. Modify the game further by changing object types, implementing levels, or adding a timer. The possibilities are endless. Before we wrap up, let's clean up our project structure. Ensure your classes, methods, and resources are organized properly for maintainability and readability. Thank you for watching this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more tutorials, and leave a comment with your feedback. Happy coding!